Hey folks, Steve I here.
All
Welcome
right,
to School of Rock. You rolling?
we are rolling, Steve. So I'm going to give
All
folks
right.
just a moment to sign up for our session today. That number is climbing. We've already got 500 folks in the first few seconds that have logged in. So that's pretty awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us today. This session is part of our artist session series that we're doing through all of this COVID-19 pandemic. We're really enjoying getting to engage with all of our students around the world. We've had students tuning in from South America and Australia and Canada through all these sessions. So it's been really awesome to connect. So Steve Vai is going to give us an introduction to his book. I've got it right here. He's got a new book called Videology. And yeah, in partnership with our friends at Hal Leonard, Steve Vai is joining us. Guys didn't know you can purchase any of Hal Leonard's sheet music books through your local School of Rock through the Gear Select program. So if you want more information about that, check in with your local School of Rock. We've got some other fun stuff in store for you guys today as well. So before we kick things off, as usual with these sessions, we are partnered with the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide. They're an incredible organization with an important cause, more important now than ever, now that we're all in isolation and getting used to how things are right now. I'm hoping one day, very soon, to return to rocking on stage with everybody at School of Rock and putting on some shows. But for now, I'm really excited that we can still connect with everybody remotely, do our lessons, do new master classes, and do this artist session series. So this has been a lot of fun. But make sure that you check out the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide at sptsusa.org. You can learn more and donate to their organization at that website. And they've got resources for teens, for adults, for educators, and more. And before I give Steve the floor, today we are doing a book giveaway thanks to our friends over at Hal Leonard. So today we're going to have 5 lucky winners that are going to receive a free copy of Videology. We'll get it shipped right out to you. We're going to do a random drawing based on the chat. So if you guys are all on the chat, I want you guys to submit your full name, your age, and your School of Rock location in the chat window, not in the Q&A window. And then we're going to go ahead and draw five winners, and we'll get in touch with your local schools to send you a copy of the recent book that Steve's got out. And without further ado, Steve, I'd love to turn over the floor to you to talk about it.
All right, I got the floor. Hey, it's so nice to be here. You know, I've been doing more of these live streams, and it's kind of nice to be live. That's right, I'm here right now with you. And give you a little background on Videology. When I was very young, I was fascinated with the idea of the written language of music. I don't know, it always looked beautiful to me, and I wanted to know it. I wanted to understand it. And I used to, doodle little black dots. And eventually when I started playing the guitar when I was 12, but was actually composing before that, just because I, like all good Italian kids from Long Island, I played the accordion when I was 9. That's right. All I could actually play was Smoke on the Water. But it made sound, and I got to be able to kind of see the notes, and started putting it together in my head what those notes meant, and started to realize the vast creative potential in the understanding of this language of music, how you can translate inner ideas into notational form. And it's a fantastic creative tool. So when I was in 7th grade, I started taking this really very intensive high school theory class by this guy, Bill Westcott. And it was a 12th grade class, but he allowed me to start taking it in 7th grade. And I took it all through high school, and it was really my main focus. There was 2 things. There was that, and also my guitar lessons, which many of you know that I was taking guitar lessons from Joe Satriani, because we lived in the same town. And so all through this period in high school, when I was learning, that's where I learned the majority of the language of music, the written, the music theory. Virtually 95% of all the music theory I learned was in that high school class. But I never really connected, I wasn't connecting the dots with the music theory and the guitar, because when I would engage in the theory, I would just compose, or I'd be writing, and I had to compose a piece of music every day as per my assignment with Bill Westcott. But then when I was done with that, I'd go and I play Led Zeppelin and just learn how to play the guitar, but not really bringing the theoretical music theory mind into the guitar. It wasn't until my lessons with Joe, because he had Bill Westcott also. And he started kind of enlightening me to how all of this music theory I was learning can be applied to playing the guitar. And this was a lovely awakening. And really, those were the impetus and the information that I had learned that I used throughout my entire career. And I always felt one day I'd love to, I like to teach this stuff somehow, because I see the great value in it. But I also know that the music theory, which is like the academics of music, is only one part of the equation. In the book, I divide up the theory into two categories. I should say, each piece of theory is divided into two categories. One category is the academic, or the theoretical, or the intellectual understanding. And the second is the experiential, where the theory becomes the tool, and it's not the means, it's just a tool. The means is the experiential aspect of what you're creating. So I guess push came to shove, and I was doing my Vi Academy, the camp, the Vi camps, and they were just great. Really enjoying them. I did one every 18 months. I think we got one coming up next summer. But in one of them, they all have kind of sort of categories. And one of them I wanted to focus on music theory and how it relates to the guitar. So I wrote this PDF document for the people that were going to be at the camp. And I thought, well, here it is. Here's the seeds of a book. So I spent some more time, and I actually constructed this book, Videology, which, there's many, many ways to get information these days, especially through, School of Rock and the internet. So if anybody's interested in something like music theory or anything virtually, you can really find some great sources for it on the web. And especially when it comes to how music theory applies to the guitar. But in all the books that I've gone through in my life, and I've seen quite a few that address music theory, I always kind of felt that the linear aspect of the learning of music theory, it was always sort of juxtaposed in a way that didn't make much sense to me. So, because it's kind of like when if you have to learn about something and you start reading about it, and there's terminologies that they expect you to know, but you don't know because they didn't explain them. And then you go on trying to figure out the rest of it without knowing actually what a particular piece of the puzzle is. It doesn't work, So I tried to construct Videology in a very sort of a chronological, a linear fashion based on how I suspect the mind works best at picking up this stuff and actually being able to use it. So this book is not a guitar lesson. It doesn't have technique in it. It's really my idea of an overview of music theory and how it can apply to the guitar and how it can be beneficial in a musician's life and a guitar player's life. Because the moment you mention the word music theory, some people, their toes curl up. The input jack on their guitar closes up. It's just like this fear. It's like this kind of like mystique that they're just kind of there's a fear, and because they don't know, it's not that difficult. There's simple principles, and most people are intelligent enough to just pick them up. Now, I always felt also that music theory is not, it's not necessary to be an effective musician. Being an effective musician comes from a different place than an intellectual understanding of the academic. And that comes from your creative instincts. That's where the electricity is. You know, it's where the juice of your effect in the music, that in the playing that you create, it doesn't come from the theory. But the theory can aid in opening up various roads in your imagination that will help to cultivate and expand your imaginative tools. So what I'm saying is, having a relatively good understanding of music theory can open up a tremendous amount of your creativity. But it's not the creativity itself. So the way I ended up kind of constructing this was from the mentality of a guitar player that didn't know anything. So I don't suspect that that's any of you guys, though. But the thing that I think could be very valuable for somebody in a book like this is in the understanding of what it means, what the difference is between intellectual understanding and experiential knowing. So the intellectual understanding is the sort of, I'll give you an example. Okay, so hang on. All right, 1 second. So let's say I'm going to learn, I want to learn my chords, okay? And I'm a young guitar player and I'm really excited and I want to learn these chords, and I want to start with just simple open chords. What I'm discussing holds true for anybody that's discovering any chord, whether it's an Alan Holdsworth kind of a thing or anything. There's the difference. And I'll just give this one example of what I think the value of this book can be in all of its chapters, when somebody can understand the difference between the academic and the experiential. Okay, so this is a great thing to do, because the most valuable tool that you have is your ears. And your ears are the thing that is listening to the melodies inside of you that's coming out when you're playing. So when I say your most valuable tool is your ears, I'm not just referring to, you know, listening in the outside world, you know, where you're in a musical environment and there's chords flying all over the place and there's sounds going on and you're kind of like, what, you know, what scale is, what key? The listening in a situation like that is the gateway to your creativity, because in the listening of what's going on, there's a movement in you to respond musically. And if your mind is congested with too much theoretical understanding and not enough experiential understanding of the theory, you'll be thinking about music theory and scales whenever you play, and you'll sound that way. And this book tries to take you beyond that. So for instance, if you're learning your chords, there's two levels in the learning of let's say even just a chord. There's the academic understanding, and what it says is, you know, this is a D chord, right? And I'm just using a simple D chord. And so that's information, and it requires you to put your first finger on the second fret of the G string, your third finger on the third fret of the B string, second finger on the second fret of the E string, and the open D string. So that's more information, academic information about this chord. And you can go deeper into the academics of this chord by And this is the voicing. You know, you introduce more information. Voicing. What is voicing mean? Voicing is the order of the scale degrees, the way that spell a chord. So in a situation like this D chord, you've got the root, the fifth, the third, root, the fifth, the octave, and the third. So now you have more information. You know the voicing, and now you can even write it out and learn the notes, and figure out what this chord looks like in manuscript form on paper and what it looks like in tab form. So this is all information, and it's good information. But in reality, it's not the chord. This is the chord. Whoop, no, it's not. This is the chord. So in the learning of the chord, there's the academic, but the most vital aspect of the learning of this chord is when you apply your ability to listen very deeply. So I'm going to play this chord again and listen to it very, very deep, just the chord, not the information in the chord, the story of the chord, the personality. This chord creates, it has a personality to it. And you can feel that personality if you listen. So I'm going to play it and listen extremely powerfully, very focused. Even as the notes are dying out into empty space, keep your attention fully on it. That's a D chord. Everything else about this chord can be helpful, but it's not the truth. So you want to find the truth of this chord. And this is valuable because you're creating a personal relationship with the sound that's coming out of your fingers. And you can do that with all the chords you learn. Take a chord like this. Okay, so I can give you all the academic information about what this chord is. You can call it a B flat major 7, 6, 9, sharp 11 chord. And I can tell you why and all this stuff. And that's all fabulous, but it's not the chord. The atmosphere of this chord is the chord. The heart of this chord is the story that it paints in your mind. So you embrace this chord on an experiential level. And the reason why this is so valuable is because you're making yourself musically aware on an experiential level. And that's going to be your best tool when you're in a musical environment with others, because you'll hear the personality of the music that's coming by, and then you'll respond accordingly, as opposed to responding with, okay, that's a B flat major 7, 6, 9, sharp 11. That means I could play a Lydian scale. Okay, so where's my Lydian scale? Okay, here it is. Okay, now I know where to go. Okay, that's one way to play. But there's another way. So this book is outlined in this linear fashion that expresses the intellectual sort of understanding, but also points to how you can experience it on an experiential level. And then there's just simple information, like, you know, it starts out really simple. So probably way simpler than most of you, where most of you are at right now, because it even starts just telling you what notes are, and sharps and flats and the symbols, and what, you know, talks about memorizing the fretboard. But it goes a step further, because even what the example that I just showed, with listening really carefully to a chord and feeling its atmosphere, developing a personal relationship with the fragrance of the chord. That's pretty cool, huh? Anyway, so you do the same thing when you learn notes. You do, and some of you may be surprised to discover that you have perfect pitch. And what that means is that I can at the surface of my mind, I can very easily discover that that's an F on the B string. right? Great. Now I know it and I'm going to memorize it. Okay, that's right there. I know I'm going to say it's always F. It's always F. It's F there, F there. Okay, now I know all my Fs. You don't know F. You don't know F and S. Anyways, never mind. Okay, what you know when you discover this F is what you discover when you give it your full attention. It's sort of like memorizing a phone number. Do you know, like if somebody says, okay, here's my phone number, 818-643-2162. That's not my phone number, by the way, but you 818-643. So there's something going on in your mind right now that's memorizing that number. It's seeing the number, it's figuring out ways to memorize it. Can you do that with your ears with this note? That's an F. You spend long enough on it and it will happen. And this opens up oceans of freedom in your playing. So very simply, it starts just with notes. And then it goes into, there's even a note recognition exercise, you know. And then it goes into advanced notes. So there's also two levels. There's of each aspect. There's a beginner kind of surface level, and then there's more advanced. So like when it comes to notes, the advanced level of learning notes, and you may never use this information, but it's cool to know, and all you got to do is read it and you know it. And this, when you understand this language, it helps with even just communicating with others. So the advanced notes part ventures into things like quarter tones and semitones and these kinds of things. And it shows, it gives a list of the symbols of quarter tones and this kind of thing. So it's pretty advanced, but it's advanced information that's really easy to learn just by looking at it once. What else? Okay. So then it goes into scales, same kind of thing. Scales, if I had a nickel, I probably do have a nickel. For every time somebody has said to me, what are the modes? What are they? How do they work? You know, what it's like this mystery, you know, they got to crack the code of the modes. And yeah, there is sort of a code to it. That's just the intellectual aspect of it. So like in a nutshell, and I'm sure you all know this, a mode is a scale that begins on a different scale degree of its mother scale. So if you have something like, just like sorry if I'm wasting your time with this, but just a G major scale, that's a G major. The mode, the second degree mode is D Dorian, but it's really just a G major scale starting from the second tone. So the third is the Phrygian, et cetera, et cetera. You can find this information out everywhere. The mystery, the confusement comes with the simple, with the confusing thought that, well, if the modes are all the same scale, then why do I need to learn them? You know, where is the use in the modes? Well, very interesting thing happens when you take a mode and you make its root the atmosphere. So in the key of G, if I'm playing in G major, but A is the foundation, you're not going to hear a G major scale. You're going to hear a D Dorian, which is the same as G major. So what does that sound like? So that's academic information. But in reality, what you want to do is memorize, create a personal relationship with the atmosphere, the fragrance of the Dorian mode. And that I'm just playing little ditties here, but you know, that's the tonality. Hey Greg, can I have a heavy pick? They're right over there in the, yeah. So there's an atmosphere there. And then you can, thanks. And then you do that with all the modes, you know, and then you hear their flavor. Like if I was in the key of E Lydian, so to speak, what you know, the Lydian scale is a major scale with a raised fourth. Great information to know, but what really is the Lydian scale? This tonality. hear the tonality? So that's the Lydian scale. And the ideology ventures into all of these modes, and then the advanced aspect of the modes starts venturing into synthetic modes, modes built off of scales other than the major scale. I mean, if you can imagine, there's as many modes. Well, there's a mode for, if a scale has 5 notes, 6 notes, 7 notes, 9 notes, there's a mode that sounds completely different. I should say there's a mode for each scale degree that sounds completely different than the root mode. So the academic understanding of this stuff has its place, but the real value for it for you is going to be in the memorizing of the atmosphere of the mode. And then it goes on and on through all sorts of different studies. It goes into tons of scales and their modes, exploring the neck with the blues scales, these kinds of things. And then it starts getting into more theoretical things like circle of fifths. I drew all this stuff myself, by the way. This entire book, I handed it in as is, because I like doing stuff like that, the colors, and I don't know. It's kind of an art project. So what else to get? And because I'm a composer and I love composing my whole life, a lot of the information I've learned through the years was focused on composing. So I put some of that information in this book too, although it may not necessarily be guitar oriented, like transposing instruments. This is really for people who are interested in composing, but also it's good to know that the guitar is a transposed instrument. It reads up an octave from where it sounds. But this has a list of every instrument and its transposition, just in case you want to be a composer. And it has all the, there is a section on composition that will give you the tools, if you're interested, in how to decorate the staff so it sounds to the liking of your ears. And the great thing, one of the great things about composing is you're the boss. You are the boss. It's not like you're saying, hey, I got this part. What do you got? They have to follow every single thing you write. Love it. So then there's a really valuable section here. It's a chord dictionary. And I went to the wall for this one. I mean, I dug as deep as I can go to explain and show the voicings of virtually, not the voicings, the chemistry, the construction, the chemical construction of a chord. All chords, and they're all in this, and still to really understand them requires the experiential approach besides the surface approach. So it goes on, and then it goes into polyrhythms and tuplets and polymetrics, all sorts of things that even if you don't necessarily apply them, they're good to kind of know. And it's so nice for me that this book, it's funny because these days, for a guitar player to have a hit record, it just doesn't happen. But I can get a hit book. And this book, man, when it came out, it sold like crazy. I couldn't believe it. It's like a hit. And the good folks at Hal Leonard did such a great job. I can't believe it. It's such a nice thing. People ask me, are you ever going to write a book about your life? And it's like, nah, there's my book. And they released it in various languages. I know that the Spanish version, this is the Spanish version. The Japanese version came out. The Portuguese version came out. German, they're working on German. And it's really nice. So that's Videology. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Awesome, Steve. Thank you so much. I love this approach to music theory and just really embracing the experiential side of all that information. So we've got a ton of enthusiastic questions coming through the Q&A, and I'm going to work to contextualize some of them and give us a little flow here. So I've got just based on what you mentioned about theory being information, I think one more aspect of musicianship that's maybe also information, more so information for your muscles, is just like technical proficiency. So I've got a question from Trey in our Temecula School of Rock, just asking about your practice routine. And I know you've actually published some books about the 10-hour and 30-hour guitar workout. So you've put a lot of thought into your practice routine. Do you want to give us maybe the brief version of your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, at any stage of exploration, you have to go through the phase of learning and honing your skill. You got to prepare the vessel, so to speak, before you can effortlessly express yourself with little limitations. And you have to decide how much technique you actually need to express those ideas. What you may require in the form of technique could be very different than what somebody else might require. So for instance, Bob Dylan doesn't need a lot of technique to get his point across. Someone like John McLaughlin does, So the way that you approach your practice needs to be kind of focused on what your goals are, what your needs are in regard to your technique to get your point across. And for me, I don't know why, it was always my kind of desire to have a really powerful, effortless, kind of elegant, almost wizard-like technique. That's what I thought about as a kid. I thought, I want to be able to play the shit out of that instrument without any limitations, and I want it to look fun, So I loved practicing, because there's nothing more rewarding than not being able to do something and then working on it and then all of a sudden being able to do it. And that's like makes every day Christmas. So my original practice schedule or routine when I was younger was quite intensive. I remember, and I used to write it all down. I'm kind of anal like that, I used to write down and I get my lessons from Joe, and I had several other teachers that I was taking lessons from, and I would just focus. And usually 9 hours a day was my target. Sometimes this was difficult, especially when you had a paper route. But that was, except on weekends, it was usually more. And sometimes I would like go to sleep really early on a Friday and work from Saturday till school on Monday, just practicing. And I loved it. And I also found time for doing social things too. I hung out with friends and did all this. But the regime was very rigid. It was like 1 hour of exercises, various exercises at different speeds, clean and then faster, 1 hour of scales, faster, 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 1 hour of chord reading. So it was all these different kinds of subdivisions of this 9 hour period. That was pretty heavy until I went to college when I was 18, because everything changes, obviously. You can't sit around for 9 hours. And then through the years, my practice schedule was really about either learning a piece of music, like a Frank song, or working out ideas. I don't sit and do those practice schedules anything. The days of honing that skill were long gone, and I've reaped the benefits of it, and I keep them up. I try to keep my chops up just by continuing to play. I know I have a tendency to go on with the answers, but sorry, I'll try to go quicker.
No worries, Steve. So I know that's great. So if you guys are interested in learning more about that 10-hour, 30-hour guitar,
it's all the documents of.
I think there's is it on here? Is it one of those? Is that it?
I think so. I don't really know.
I think you can buy it.
I think there's either 2 books or there's 1 book now. I know that there was the 10-hour and the 30-hour, and that there may be 1 book that has them both now. So it's all Hal Leonard. But ultimately, what it showcases is the regimented hourly focus of my 9-hour practice routine, and also it took a certain amount of 9-hour practice routines to get the whole circle of the things I wanted to cover, and that took 30 hours. So that's what the 30-hour work is.
So 30 hours a day is how much you have to practice. There's your answer. So Steve, I know that over your career, you've had a passion for working with manufacturers and helping to design gear. And I know recently, I got a chance to take a look at the new PIA guitars that you've got. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into working with people designing gear, and what was the inspiration for your most recent project?
Yeah, it's kind of just came along with the territory when I started to kind of come on the scene, because I was with Dave Roth, and I had Crossroads that had come out, and Flexible, and then finally when Passion and Warfare hit, it was like, So when that happens, manufacturers are interested in working with you and hearing your ideas. So this was a nice situation to be in, and I wanted to take great advantage of it. But it happened innocently and kind of seamlessly. And it started with my love for Strats and my love for Les Pauls and my dislike of Strats and my dislikes of Les Pauls. I loved them both and I hated them both because they both offered something that I wanted. But do you ever notice that you can't always get what you want? But you can if you think outside of the box. And that's what I did. So I went and I had a guitar made from a little shop, and it had all of the things that I wanted in a guitar. And I wasn't doing it for any other reason except, boy, it would be nice to have this, So that was the birth of the Gem. And then, everybody knows the story. So the Gem was unbelievably successful for the past 35 years. But there comes a time, one of the great things about working with companies like Ibanez is they're always interested in innovation and moving forward and expanding on their ideas. So this relationship was a good one because I like doing that too. So it finally got to and all through the years, the Gem did go through various permeations and changes, but it wasn't until recently when I thought, okay, it's time to do something a little more radical, because all the previous changes were aesthetics and maybe some audio, pickups and stuff like that. But I started to visualize something different. And that's when we started working on the PIA. And that just turned out incredibly well. I'm still stunned over it. But this also, this same mechanism was at place with things like outboard gear, pickups, all sorts of various things through my career where I kind of think about an idea and then the company will kind of work that until it's kind of resonates with the thing I was looking for. And then they sell it and we all make a lot of money. Hopefully. Sometimes not.
So one thing that I noticed going through this book was that you've got a couple excerpts just demonstrating some pieces, specifically one of a transcription you did with Zappa. And I know that was probably an incredibly formative time just working with such a legend. And I've got a couple questions just about your time with Frank, and a specific one from one of our instructors actually in Oak Park, Illinois, asking about how you figured out how to transcribe and notate some of his music when some of the devices to actually perform it didn't necessarily exist. And a little bit about pushing the boundaries of the rules of composition and as opposed to being a student writer or composer just making stuff up because they don't know the rules to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got into transcribing because I loved writing notes, and I realized, well, I can hear things and write them down in manuscript form. And I love that idea. And when I was going to Berklee College of Music, I really dove into that. And I was fascinated with this piece of music by Frank called The Black Page. it was something about it. And I just said, what is that? Why does that sound like, how is it? And that's when I really discovered the concept of polyrhythms and this kind of polymetric aspect of rhythms and stuff. So that was so fascinating to me, quintuplets and septuplets, and then nested tuplets and odd rhythms going across bar lines. You take 17 and put it on 3, and then you put little things inside of it. It was like a little chemistry lab, and it sounded really cool and different. So the best material that I found that actually contained these abstract rhythms was Frank's guitar playing, because he wasn't, he didn't play like, 8th notes and 16th notes. I mean, his phrasing and everything was abstract and free. And when he saw my transcription of the Black Page, he hired me to transcribe. So I was 18 at the time and too young to join his band or audition for him, But he hired me as a transcriptionist, and I started to transcribe all these things. The first thing he gave me was this 2 cassettes filled with these crazy guitar solos and drums, 10-minute guitar solos with drums, Vinny Colaiuta, going out to Venus. These guys were taking it so far out. So the transcriptions look pretty much like rocket science. And that's a little piece of one of them is what you're referring to. Did I answer the question? What was the second part of the question?
I think the other question is, how do you talk about work that pushes the boundaries of composition?
Okay. Yeah. Well, when it comes to rules, there are certain rules that you have to adhere to, such as this is a beat and it takes up this much time. And this is the symbol that you use to indicate to the player that this is what they're supposed to do. So those kinds of things are inescapable. If you're going to communicate with another musician, you have to know the language. But that's where the rules end. Because when it comes to the composition, the actual composition of music, unless you're deciding to stay within certain parameters, such as classical music or jazz, there's formulas that make it sound like the way it does, and they're rigid and they're restrictive. Within those parameters, you can bend the rules or work around them. The main rules you can't break. This is a quarter note, end of story. Okay, that's information you can't change. Why? Why? You just confuse the issue. But what you do with that quarter note, there is no rules. So the expansive nature of your own imagination can be expressed with the available tools, even on the academic tools in the composition of music. And the restrictions that you put on yourself are there to simply adhere to a particular genre or a particular harmonic atmosphere you're setting up or rhythmic atmosphere. But at the end of the day, besides those academic rules, there's no rules.
Right, and you're the boss. That was the other thing.
You're the boss. You are the boss. You're the boss of that note.
Awesome.
And the other great thing about composing is you write one little thing and it has to stay the same for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not open to interpretation.
So we've got a handful of folks that are asking about some of your favorite gigs and projects, and maybe the toughest projects and gigs that you've had over the course of your career. And you've had you've done everything from performing with David Lee Roth to working on video game soundtracks. So can you talk a little bit about some of your favorite type of work to do and maybe some of the toughest gigs that you've had to prepare?
My favorite type of work to do is to imagine something and then manifest it. Whether it's a riff, or a song or anything like that. But I've had such a charmed career, you know. Within it has been challenges, of course, but so what kind of challenges are you referring to you'd like me to talk about?
So maybe some of our past guests have mentioned, just for an example of a gig that they got a call the same afternoon that they had to burn an entire set later that day, and it was
Oh, that,
just
oh
like
my
a
gosh, there was all sorts of stuff like that.
yeah.
Every piece of music that Frank gave me was a challenge because you had to memorize it. And sometimes they were, 15 minutes of sheer terror, you know. So, and you had to get it done right away, so that was a challenge. Another, there's always great challenges, but sometimes it's the challenge that gets you to move your ass, when I joined the band Alcatraz, Ingve was in the band, and he left the band, and they had 3 gigs left. And I auditioned on one day, and I got the gig and had 1 day to learn the entire set. That was hard, but I did it. When probably one of the other really big challenges was when I was doing parts of the soundtrack to the movie Bill and Ted's Bogus Adventure. I think that was the name of the film. They had come to me to do some of the whittly guitar stuff and some of the score, So I said, great. And there was this end scene that they had shot, and they already had somebody do it was like the pinnacle of the 2 movies, It was supposed to be the guitar performance that I don't know, saved the world. So I'm watching this, and it sucked. It just wasn't there. I mean, for me at least, I'm going, no. And I said, you want me to fix this too? And they said, no, we got it. This one's fine. I said, okay, Then they had a premiere of the movie on a Friday at Grumman's Chinese Theater, and they called me on Monday, and they said, we reshot the entire ending of the film, and we need you to recompose the entire guitar battle at the end. And it's being shown on Friday. I'm like, what are you, out of your mind? I went into a workload for 3 days and nights, and anybody that was in my vicinity was not allowed to talk to me. Nobody was allowed to speak because it would only take time, and most of the things they were saying were useless and nonsense. I just needed to, it was intense, but I got it done. And very interesting, funny thing happened. I was sitting in the movie that Friday watching it, big premiere at Grumman's Chinese Theater. And sitting in front of me was Jimmy Iovine and Ted Fields. They were the guys that owned the company that was releasing the movie and part of my communications. And at the end of the movie, Ted Fields stands up and turns around and shakes my hand and says, thanks for saving the movie. So I guess it worked. The other real challenge that I recall, there's a Japanese composer, Ichu Nodaira, and he wanted to compose this very abstract piece of music called Fire Strings. And he wanted to use guitar and orchestra. He was a very contemporary composer, meaning the stuff sounds like hell. It's like very atonal and almost unlistenable. And he didn't really, I mean, it's listenable if it touches you in a particular way, which I get a kick out of sometimes, but he wasn't quite sure how to compose for an electric guitar because the composers don't learn that. There's limitations in all instruments that you have to understand before you can compose for it. And the guitar is not a conventional classical instrument. So he flew from Japan, spent some time with me, and I kind of gave him pointers on certain things. And this guy composed this piece of music. It's about 35 minutes long. And it was the most terrifying thing I've ever had to learn in my life. I spent 6 days secluded. I had to go away and focus nonstop. Wake up in the morning, boom, go to sleep at night. That's it. I actually damaged my hand. It was the first time and the only time I ever actually damaged myself because the music was impossible. It was within one bar, he might have me hit a note, bend it up, hit the wah-wah, move the tone control, whammy the note down, and then bend it back down while hitting a flanger. All this insane stuff. And that was the biggest challenge, musical challenge I ever had.
That's amazing.
It sounds like hell.
So I've got some folks that all of our students are now operating remotely. They're taking their lessons and doing it from their homes these days while we're all wrestling with the pandemic. But it's clear that you've still got your studio. Can you tell us a little bit about not only your studio, but I also have some folks that are asking about other hobbies, including your bees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I always loved the idea of engineering. That was up there, right up there with my love for the guitar and music theory when I was a kid. And I remember I never pined after a guitar. I always knew that I'd have one, but I always wanted a sound recorder, reel to reel, And that was the first thing I bought when I had enough money when I moved out to California. And I set up a little studio in my house with a 4-track recorder. And I was in heaven. I didn't have to go anyplace. I didn't have to answer to anybody. I could just sit there and record. And that's how I kind of cut my teeth on engineering and learning how to record. And then hanging out with Frank, that's where I learned everything about engineering. By watching him, listening to him, he would give me gear that he'd say, okay, take this, learn, check this out. So I'm like, what is a compressor, And so what is an EQ? I remember he gave me this dual parametric EQ when I was making Flexible. And I put it, I'm like, wow, this is what that can do. It was like discovering a treasure or something. So I focused really hard on the memorizing of frequencies and what happens when you move certain things and how it changes. And this was the learning of how to decorate the stereo spectrum. It has highs. It's like your backyard. There's things that can be on top of each other that don't look good, or and there's things that can be too high or too low. So it's like an art project, and I love that. So I kept collecting as much studio gear as I can, and with whatever I had, I used it to the fullest. And the first real studio I built wasn't a real studio. It was a tool shed out back in this house that I purchased in Sylmar. But it was my little slice of heaven. And boy, oh boy, I spent 5 months building it. I didn't build it. I just, reconstructed like the walls, padding them and stuff like that. And then I recorded Flexible. And I love the idea of having my own studio. I always have. I've never recorded any of my music outside of my own studios. And those studios have changed through the years. The one after that was the Mothership, which was in Hollywood. And I had this amazing API console. Discovered that API was my favorite sound after doing massive shootouts with other types of consoles and stuff. And then that continued to progress to the point where I had so much gear. I had so much outboard gear. I started an equipment rental company, and I hired a guy to run it, and I made a fortune. Because back then you could rent, an AMX RMX for like $350 a day, and I had like 4 of them. So this was just an entrepreneurial kind of thing that I did with all this incredible gear that I had. I mean, I had the first 32-track digital machine that Otari made. The thing cost $160,000, and I bought it, and we rented it. When I got rid of it, I had to pay somebody $1,000 to come and just take it, to throw it away. But in the meantime, I made a lot of money with it. But so I always had an interest. So when I built my latest studio, the Harmony Hut, the one that you see in back of you here, it went through various permeations. I mean, it looks big now, but when I moved here, it was a tiny little hut, a gardener hut. As a matter of fact, the house we live in was vacant for 10 years before we moved into it, because the owner was kooky. And the only person that lived on it was the gardener, and he lived in this little hut, and he died. And he was sitting in this room dead for 3 weeks before they found him. This was before I was in the picture. And that's how isolated this property was. And to this, and these days, if the alarm goes off in the studio and the alarm company calls, the code, I've changed it, but it used to be the dead gardener. Anyway, so I ended up really refining my taste and knowing what I wanted, but I couldn't find it in a console. So I had a custom console built, and that's the one you see over there. Maybe one day I'll give a real tour. It's a fantastic console. I don't want to unplug all this stuff to bring you over there because I might screw something up. Well, I don't know. Maybe I can. Let's try it, okay? You still there?
We're still here, Steve.
Okay. So that's Greg. He's my engineer. He keeps me, he makes it real around here. And this is my console, and it was built by Tree Audio. And it's unique because what it has is, I don't know if you can see that, but these are 500 series modules, meaning there's various manufacturers that make these, and they come in various configurations like EQs, mic pre's, compressors, and these here are custom made for me, along with these EQs. These are compressors, these are EQs, these are API. And the reason why I had the console built this way is so that I can fit API modules in the channel, because that's my favorite. That's my favorite sound. Are you guys getting this? Your meeting should start in a few seconds. Whoops, I think I lost you.
Oh, no, Steve, we're still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you see me still?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so I can't see you. I lost you, but anyway, here goes. So this was really nice. Just guide me if I'm pointing to something and you're not getting it. And then over here, I have this rack here of the API modules. And that's the main, this is it. I mean, these mic pre's, these API mic pre's, out of all the ones we try, those are the ones. And then there's all sorts of outboard gear. And on this side of the console, I had it fashioned so that the modules are the bigger kind for the Neves, the old Neves, like the 1073, 1078, because I like that sound too. And then these EQs and mic pre's were custom built for me by Steve Furlot, and they're just freakishly good, very transparent. And the way I had the console constructed was with all of the EQs within reach, because a lot of times, most conventionally, consoles have the bus sends, aux sends down here, and every time you go to, tweak something, your head is leaving the listening environment. And then there's all sorts of this stuff. And then I got the Pro Tools rig, and that's basically the studio, and suits me very well.
Awesome. Thanks for the studio tour there, Steve.
Does that answer the question? I don't know if it does.
It does, yeah, absolutely. I think the second part of the question, if there's anything outside of music that keeps you busy, and I know that.
The bees. Yeah. The bees were, when we first moved here, I had mentioned that the property was vacant for 10 years and everything was dead. And I wanted to plant some fruit trees. My wife wanted a garden. So I just kind of did a little research, and I discovered that honeybees are a great way to pollinate. And it's an easy hobby. You don't have to do anything. The bees do it all. And I called a local beekeeper. This was 25 years ago. And I started keeping bees, and I love it. It's a simple, it's kind of an eclectic hobby, but hey, but I highly recommend it. It's fun, and you get honey, and bees are just the most fascinating little creatures. And I'm waiting for the next nice day, because I have to get back in the hive, because I bought one of those flow hives, where the honey just comes right out, right off the tap. And I'm interested in seeing how that works. So yeah, that's a hobby. Another little hobby I have occasionally is painting.
Awesome. Thanks for giving us a little insight into that. So we've got a few minutes left here. I want to thank you again so much for your time today, Steve. This has been, again, thank you to Hal Leonard for helping us get connected with you and doing our book giveaway. This is going to be fun. So if you haven't entered your name, age, and School of Rock location into the chat, make sure you do that before we wrap up today's call. one thing that I love to ask our guests on this series is if you had one piece of advice that the teenage version of yourself wished that you learned sooner as a musician, what would it be?
You're doing fine.
$1,000 of rent a month. So
That's the advice. You're doing fine. You're actually doing really good. That advice in and of itself is what young musicians need to hear. And it's true. Maybe that's not a very satisfying answer, but please remember it. So if I was to give you a piece of advice on, what was that, music theory, did you say? Or
I think just as a musician in general, I think you're doing fine is probably, it's short and sweet, and it's probably very important information that we all.
It's the most important thing to know. But having said that, the other piece of advice I might give is through your career, you will be having to make a lot of choices. And a lot of those choices may be confusing at times. You may have a clear answer. You may have some confusement as to what the next best move is. So there's all of these decisions you're going to be making throughout your entire career. But there's one that I would suggest that you make of vital importance, meaning it's the most important thing that you do in your career. And what that is, oh, I gotta go. I'm kidding. Sorry. What that is of vital importance is that you are performing and you are finding and expressing the music and the ideas in you that are enthusiastic and exciting to you. That you're making the music that is meaningful to you right now. That's of primary importance, because without it, the rest of your musical career will suck. Okay? Because nothing will work for you, and even if it does, it's not going to be satisfying. But when you're actually expressing your uniquely creative musical ideas, you get a feeling of fulfillment in a way that worldly success cannot replicate. And the worldly success that you may experience is a consequence of the quality of your unique ideas and how you find ways to manifest them into your world without any excuses.
Perfect. That's great advice, Steve. So I know that we actually have literally hundreds of questions. I know we couldn't get to everything today, and a lot of folks are just kind of remarking on some of their favorite parts of your career and questions about other aspects of what you've done over the many years.
I'm happy to give you a little more time if you like. I'll get through the questions quicker.
Oh, I don't know, we've got a ton of them here, Steve. So, but I know that there's a ton of opportunities for them to check out what you're doing live on your social media. I know you've got a couple series where you're talking about a bunch of different aspects, and I want to make sure that.
Yeah, on Tuesdays at noon, I've been having a little live stream called Alien Guitar Secrets, and that's where I kind of talk about guitar, talk about music, talk about my experiences and how they might help people. And then on Thursday, it's called Under It All, and it's more esoteric. It gets really deep into just other things, more esoteric, metaphysical, spiritual kind of talk. Join us, it's fun.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Check those out. I do wish we could go all day. Steve, I thank you so much for your time today. This has been really special. We're all very thankful for your time.
A couple of questions I have. This class, like everybody that's tuning in, do they usually get together, or is this just like an online thing?
Absolutely. So this whole artist session series that we've been doing it several times a week for the past month or so, just while we've been in this pandemic, and it actually features students from all over the world. And I think, you know, after the world returns to normal, I think we'll find ourselves connecting more with students all over the world. I know that while we do have a few hundred locations in 9 countries right now, we have a few opportunities where our students connect with each other in real life, such as some destination events like we do at Summerfest and our School of Rock All-Stars tours. But this has been really special over the past several weeks to connect not only with all of our student body, but also to connect with artists such as yourself.
Well, I think it's fantastic what you're doing. I mean, obviously, an environment where you're with people is superior, you know, but this is really great. And congratulations for making the decision to tune in to the School of Rock, because this is where your heart is. And thanks for having me.
Awesome, Steve. Thank you so much for being here. Again, this has been really special. So
Good luck.
a bunch of sessions coming up next week, so y'all make sure that you join them. And don't forget to check out Steve's live streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays. All right, everybody, have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.